Hello, everyone, and welcome to Finding Your Roots, an introduction to Japanese American genealogy and NJAHS Digital Archives. For those joining us for the first time, my name is Melissa Bailey Nihei, and I'm Program Development Associate at the National Japanese American Historical Society. We're going to start our program today with a quick poll that'll appear on your screen right now. Please take a moment to respond to the 4 questions that are on your screen. All right, thanks everybody. Now we're going to go ahead and share the results of the poll. So as you can see, most of us are joining here today from the San Francisco Bay Area, but we also see we have a large number of attendees from the rest of the United States, so that's also very exciting. And also it looks like one other international. So looking at our backgrounds here, got a broad range of backgrounds here from science, humanities, arts, and then also we should probably get some questions in the audience about what other backgrounds we have here, since it looks like we have some variety. And it looks like the majority of our audience is relatively experienced in genealogy. About 51% of you have 3 or more years of experience, but a third of you are just getting started. So this is a good place for you to be today. And it looks like most of our audience here today is interested in their own family history and just their own personal interest in genealogy. So we're also going to hear more about some other family stories today and give you some more tips and tricks on learning more about your own family experience. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing right now. So just a brief introduction to how today's program is going to work. We're first going to start with a presentation from NJAHS Executive Director Rosalyn Tonai on doing your own family research in Japanese American genealogy. Next, we'll have a video presentation from NJAHS Exhibitions and Collections Manager Max Nihei. And then in closing in the program, we'll have a short Q&A with both Rosalyn and Max. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rosalyn Tonai, NJAHS Executive Director.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to Finding Your Roots, an introduction to Japanese American genealogy online. Our objective today is to show you how to access your family records online and for free or for very low cost. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I've served the Historical Society as an executive director since 1990. I've served in various capacities as project director of a multitude of projects and exhibitions, and seen some life-affirming transformations throughout the work that we do. And through the Getty Museum Management Institute, I further developed my skill sets and continue to work on these long-term vision of the veterans who started the organization and work to secure its future. You know, as full disclosure, I am not a certified genealogist. I've taken an online genealogy course from the Boston University. What I'd like to offer today is to share with you my hands-on experience, both personally and professionally in the fields, so that you can enhance your skills and conduct your genealogical research successfully. We noticed in the poll that half of you are quite experienced in at least 3 or more years of working on your genealogy research, and others, and about a third of you are just getting started. So, and a little bit of the rest sort of in between. So it's a nice spread. So let's just get started. People ask me, what makes a good genealogist? According to Wikipedia, genealogy is the study of families, family history, and the tracing of their lineage. Genealogists use oral histories, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about family and to demonstrate a kinship of pedigrees of its members. Now, some of you may be getting into this for your personal enjoyment, which we saw in the survey, or because you are the keeper of family records, quite a few of you, or you are determined to solve a family mystery, all quite important. So I'm not saying that you have to be professionally trained to be successful, quite the opposite. But let's explore what it takes to be of the right mindset. You know, I would say a good genealogist questions authority. Why? On your fact-finding mission, you seek evidence and records that hold facts, all used to uncover truths. Now, can you assume that when you discover something in writing that you automatically say it is true? I saw, therefore it is not always true. A good genealogist questions authority or the evidence found in sources by seeking out 2 or 3 other pieces of evidence from different sources to verify the truth. This is an important caveat, so please keep that in mind as you conduct your research. What you encountered in records may be conflicting, so you'll have to weigh in and decipher what is the overwhelming evidence. Now, historical records are replete with contradiction, as you are finding out, like in your research. No one expects to have the perfect conclusion in every search. Sometimes mysteries never get solved. You just have to be disciplined in your approach to get a satisfactory truth. Always question your assumptions and verify them. I think those who can have a strong sense of interpersonal, local, and historical context can put themselves in the shoes of their ancestors to understand how they came to be, what made them tick. Logical and intuitive thinking may seem counterintuitive, but that's the balancing act we all do. You know, like squirrels, you have to gather bits and pieces of information data, but be able to sort the good nuts from the bad ones. You also need the passion to get the answer. Sometimes it's the thrill of the hunt. Folks who love the challenge of puzzles, Sudoku, crosswords, riddles, Rubik's Cubes, this is your lane. Plays well with others means exactly what your kindergarten teacher assessed in you. Do you like to share with others? Genealogies rewards this. You have to share in order to advance your game and knowledge of the community's interest. Finally, you need to be goal-oriented. You can't keep diving into rabbit holes of side notes and tangents, and we know how we've done all that. You have to set down certain objectives of what you want to accomplish and when, whether it's completing 3 generations of your maternal side before Thanksgiving holidays or sharing your grandfather's DOJ odyssey with your nieces and nephews. Break it down into little steps so you can check off the boxes and focus on your research question. Now get organized. And this is interesting because, you know, we think that we are super organized, but in reality, this sort of sets in. Now that I set this tone, let's get organized. If you are a pen and paper person, that's fine. But these days, a growing number of us work directly off our electronic devices with our laptops, iPads, phones, actual desktops. Please use your electronic devices, but use them wisely. For example, how many of you have a ton of icons on your desktop screen? Okay, I don't see a show of hands, but I'm assuming that we all have that. Well, don't do that. That's a high risk effort, and that's a very likely possibility that you will lose them. You will lose your folders. Also, with your downloading tons of stuff off the internet, there's lots of bugs out there. Have a virus protection program. Do not let your file sit in your downloaded folder. Like cleaning out your drawer, reset your basic good computer habits to ensure the security of your precious family files. These are pretty much basic computer organizing procedures that you should be doing to maintain the life of your files. When conducting your research, if you do these things routinely, you won't waste precious time trying to find things all over your desktop or in numerous unnecessary folders. If you're thinking of storing large manuscripts, photos, and videos, make sure you have a backup system, like placing them all on a separate hard drive and in the cloud. Tools of the trade. You know, for the beginning, don't feel that you have to keep buying all sorts of stuff. There's stuff that you already have. You don't need a lot to start. That's the beauty of online genealogy. Get devices that save you time in the long run. There's nothing like a really quick scanner for photographs and papers. Again, make sure to protect your assets, your data. The screen clipping device or the snipping tool is ideal to grab, copy, and save in your folders. So I strongly advise that. And you can just download that in your Microsoft Word or your Mac. Now start with what you have for the beginners. Now most of you, you know this. Gather from what you have, your family photographs, birth records, death certificates, passports. Keep in mind that even if you know this from memory, your mother's birth date, it's always good to have a couple of different sources for verification. You may find out in your research dates differ, and that's okay. At age 19, my grandmother opened up her own dressmaking shop in this picture, and the school's Irene, it was called, on 626 22nd Street in Oakland in 1924. We learned later that they didn't live there, but we were able to locate the site. Now document what you have, write it all down, use a spreadsheet, and then make sure to copy the URL source. This is very handy because, when you're finding the source of evidence, rather than looking through all your pieces of paper and your Post-its, it's right there on your fingertips, in your spreadsheet. Now, pedigree charts. To begin with, there are two charts that are free to download from MissBotch at .org. The pedigree charts that track information on your ancestors. And then you have the family group sheets that pertains to that one family household. Make sure you fill that out to the best of your ability. And that's just basic information. So the 3-year folks, you should have that pretty much at least started, right? I'm sure there's a lot of gaps, but you've started that. From there, take on that data and begin populating your online family tree. There's 2 we recommend, Genie.com and FamilySearch.org. Genie.com has basic a version that's free, shareable, and has privacy settings. A good general rule is not to share living people on your online family tree and expose them to the public. Respect their privacy. Now, you don't have to keep writing this down. We're gonna send this to you so that you can just click and get access. Here's a couple of samples of the Genie.com. Sorry, I had to redact the names of people who are still alive. And if you're concerned really about privacy and want more control, there's Roots Magic and Family Tree Maker. The prices are there. Other family trees are available which can use GenCom files. GenCom files is a universal file format that can be shared. And here's a I think we just passed the Roots Magic tree. Yeah. Now I'm going to tell you about 2 free online sources. One is a nonprofit run by the Church of Latter-day Saints called FamilySearch.org. The other one is the government's National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, called archives.gov. Now they have different names that don't match their entities, but just remember one is .org and the other one's .gov. These both useful sources to find index and records, case file numbers, and instructions on how to order and the duplicate contents of your subject's case files. Now, for example, the top one is a marriage index listing, the below is a death index. Notice the transcription error of Danzaburo, which is very common in Japanese names. A lot of times there's misspellings. You can request them to be corrected, I believe, in both Ancestry and Family Search. It just may take a while. Now, in Family Search, you can even get the ship manifest listings, passengers. And these are really good sources of information for your ancestors. The date of arrival, date of departure, family names, the relations, ages, places of birth, places from which they traveled. Really good stuff. And then make sure to look at page 2. Don't forget page 2. There's more rich data like dates of arrival, destination, even mother country, hometown, village addresses, name of next of kin, even physical characteristics like height and let's see, like mold, beauty marks and things like that. Don't forget to check cruise lists because they can obtain fascinating information on Japanese crew members. The US Census has valuable information. Their address usually written is vertically on the left. The address numbers are on the columns. Then there's these additional numbers that really tell you the order in which the census taker went door to door to interview and enumerate. The record list names ages, birth dates, marital status and of each member, ethnicity, country of birth, occupation. Really good stuff. Now, the 1930 and 1940 census are not exactly the same. The 1920 and 1930 census list the date of immigration entry. However, the 1940 does not. It only indicates that they resided 5 years before the census was taken. So you're not going to get that important immigration date that you've been looking for in the 1941. Still, it lists the country of origin, so you'll know that they're an immigrant. FamilySearch.org, you can only find information on the WRA camps, not the other Department of Justice camps. But for now, FamilySearch.org has the transcription records of the Japanese American so-called relocated during World War II, the WRA records. It lists by name the camp, the assembly center, the birth year, birthplace, year of arrival, language proficiency, as reported, years of school, grade completed, marital status, language spoken, occupation. You might find the alien registration number on there, but not always. There's a file number which should be written down for future reference. Now, what's good, and this is now available on FamilyResearch.org, is that you can, FamilySearch.org is that you can view the final accountability roster. So those people that are familiar with it, it's called FAR, which will tell you a lot of information. It's essentially a summary sheet of each family member incarcerated in the WRA camps from the date of arrival from the assembly center to the date of departure. It includes important things like the date of birth, members of the family, family members. You'll notice that the Issei are listed as aliens. They have different numbers. They have alien registration numbers because in 1940, every alien was assigned to numbers and had to register. Keep in mind, discriminatory exclusion laws, Issei could never become citizens. They had to carry these alien registration cards with them. Also, as they left for Army, it would state this in the code. These codes are explained on page 12 on the front of the final accountability roster. Okay, the archives.gov, you can find two types of indexes for Issei. The indexes are like finding aids, not going to tell you much, but they have listings by name of their immigration case files. Not every Issei had a case file, only if there's an issue with their immigration. For example, because picture bride immigration was questionable in the eyes of this government, they had to prove that they were not going to be a public charge or of a woman of questionable means. So most picture brides have case files. There's remarkable photographs of them, and many of these files have never been opened since their arrival. The second index is for A files. This stands for alien files. In 1940, like I said, all Issei had to register as alien, and thus an A file was established. Now, we collectively fought through the community to save these files for posterity over the past 20 years. And finally, these A files are making their way to San Bruno, the San Francisco NARA. The ones who were born over 100 years ago are now indexed and are being made available for viewing. So we really encourage you to take a look at those. And this is the general search page for National Archives. Now, when you go there, you'll see something like this. And now just a point of clarification, there are really two tracks of confinement sites. We talked about the WRA, War Relocation Authority. Now, and those of you who know the lesser known one, it's referred to the Department of Justice internment camps, which were mostly Issei men, community leaders, Japanese clergy, school teachers, martial art instructors, and they were arrested in the aftermath of the attack of Pearl Harbor. I will talk about those in the NARA source. Now, the NARA archives.gov website, you can do two things. Number one, view the transcripted data on the Japanese Americans WRA camps. And number two, request the actual case files of 4 different categories. There are these duplicates of the file's contents, right? They're not going to give you the actual ones. They're going to be duplicates. The second portal is very important because at the National Archives, you can obtain the copies of the contents. Family Search does not allow that, nor does Ancestry.com. Case files contain many different records of that person held in camp. Case files can include significant documents like the loyalty questionnaire, death certificates, report cards, scripts, receipts. You cannot view these case files online. You must request them from the National Archives. This is the only way to obtain these copies. The easy thing for you to do is request them now online. There are the WRA case files. They're they have a new name for it, but it's called the WRA case files. If you know that your grandfather was picked up by the FBI though, and detained and sent to the enemy alien DOJ internment camps, then you ask for his alien enemy case file. They also have available the compensation and reparations case files, both in 1948 and in the 1990s when redress payments were issued. So that's new. And now they have the redress testimonies during the 1980s. They're also available, and that's great. Okay, this is sort of a sample of the War Relocation Authority files. Looks like this. And then they have clear instructions to provide you with the PDF version of the file request forms, and you fill it out and you submit it. You can submit it online now. And then the Department of Justice, it looks like this. And again, they have simple directions and you follow them, and you could actually query them and punch in the first and last name of the person that you know who's in DOJ camp, and you get this. You'll notice the National Archives identifier number and the ARC identifier number. Make sure you take these numbers down, and they put them in the contact information at the bottom, especially when you fill out your request sheet. That really helps the archivist find the files faster. Once again, I just want to make it really clear. These are not online. You have to make the request for the WRA case file request with that form online. Make sure you have, it helps them with the search. So make sure you have the file, the family number, and the National Archives identifier or case record. If the person's still alive, get their permission. If they also get a signed notarized affidavit, and if you're going to be asking and the relationship, and then put that in the letter. If the person's deceased, you need a proof of death. Okay, and then again, not online, but make the request, is the alien enemy detention and internment case files. This is what they're calling it now. These are located in College Park, Maryland. Again, submit online. Put their alien registration number on and a National Archives identifier and case record. You can find those again when you click on the website. And if the person's still alive, get permission, you know, naturally, and put some sort of relationship in there. If they're deceased, you do not have to explain. You can just ask. Okay, this is a sample of what you can find, and this is one of the few things. This happens to be my grandfather, Director Tonai, who was taken to Missoula, Montana, a DOJ camp, and he was taken away on Pearl Harbor Day. He co-owned several grocery stores, but lost everything, including his new home. They sent him through the DOJ network, and he finally got paroled to Amachi to be with his family at war's end. He honored his wife's and family wishes and decided not to return to Japan. And if people don't know, DOJ stands for Department of Justice. There are other online sources, okay? And for example, check your directories from public libraries. You can find addresses and occupations in there and your names. Check newspaper articles. This and the Library of Congress has them, not too many, but a few. This happens to be the Gunjiro Aoki and the Gladys Emery, daughter of the Archdeacon of San Francisco. They were forbidden to marry in California and Washington, ended up in Utah with 6 children. The famous Sansei storyteller Brenda Wong Aoki bases her award-winning performance, Uncle Gunjiro's Girlfriend, on this romance story in the century. Google Maps are excellent. This is a great way to find your past and current locations. 1931, my great uncle Frank posed his wedding picture in the front lawn in Stockton, and here it is today. Even better, we found an old address on the passenger list, that second page I told you about. Remember how important to look on that? We found an address of, and we had our Japanese researcher colleague provide us with an updated current address. And with that, through Google Maps, we were able to find this photo of the actual family home, which is registered in my uncle's name back in 1919. They decided not to claim the property, but we visited the family homestead in Aichi in 2017. It's amazing what you can locate today. Also, another source, Find a Grave, and volunteers from all walks of life complete the circle for families who have never known where their ancestors are buried in the States. And this is true for some Japanese Americans who's lost touch with their families. This is a grave site of Fred Yamamoto, who is there's a wonderful tribute written of him. And he was killed in action in France. And we'll feature these fallen soldiers in upcoming Bay Area tribute of the Go for Broke stamp rollout on June 4th with San Francisco JCL. Other things that you can find is military from family search, registries of enlistments of U.S. Army soldiers, and also the World War I draft registration cards. Everyone had to register for the draft, and what's remarkable is you see their signature on that draft registration. There's a lot of online records for Hawaii now, and this is listed. So don't worry about this. We'll send you this, and you could also link to that. What's interesting is a Hawaii internee directory that's available through the Japanese Cultural Center. Lists the former incarcerees of the DOJ experience from Hawaii and on the mainland. It's by Cindy Thompson of Hawaii. Other requests are from Crystal City. Now, this is an interesting one from our German American Internee Coalition. And Crystal City was a family DOJ camp that housed German, Italian, and Japanese Latin Americans. What's amazing is that our colleague Werner Ulrich painstakingly wrote the names of all the families along the barracks where they resided. So this information is valuable. You go to that site and you can get that. So in closing, this is a perfect opportunity to involve your younger generation of nieces and nephews, or even borrow a young family member to get involved in helping you out in your projects and start your website. And we'll be coming up in our next session in June 26th, search for Koseki Family Registry in Japan. So contact us with questions. We have resources here to help you out and put things in historical context. My colleague, collections manager and Max Nihei will now share what's in our archives, and we can start you off in your research. Thank you very much, and happy sleuthing.
Hi, I'm Max Nihei, and I'm the Exhibitions and Collections Manager of the National Japanese American Historical Society. During my tenure preserving and providing access to the NJAHS collection over the past 10 years, I've worked on many permanent, traveling, and temporary exhibitions. Recently, we have had several fantastic opportunities to publicly showcase items from the NJAHS collections, which we have worked to preserve and grow since 1983. We have also been working to provide online public access to the collection since 2009. Today, we would like to introduce you to the NJAHS Digital Archives by giving you an overview of the NJAHS collections and the Digital Archives project, and by sharing with you some of the artifacts we have digitized. We hope it helps you on your own family research or helps you deepen your understanding of the Japanese American experience. The National Japanese American Historical Society's collection consists of approximately 34,000 artifacts, photographs, documents, books, periodicals, and oral history interviews pertaining to the Japanese American and Japanese diaspora experience. To simplify, I have broken this down into 6 categories by subject: pre-war collections, World War II military collections, World War II eviction/confinement collections, post-war collections, and special project collections. Here's also the oral history collection. The National Japanese American Historical Society's Digital Archives project was initiated in 2009 by Dr. Lin Horiyuchi in collaboration with the University of San Francisco's School of Architecture to make the architectural and engineering plans, maps, and drawings of the Japanese American confinement sites accessible online through USF's Gleason Library digital collections. Under the direction of our collections consultant Paloma Añoveros, the scope broadened to include World War II camp collections, artifacts, documents and publications, photographs, and oral history interviews from the Historical Society. To date, we have 1,310 entries in the USF Gleason Library Digital Collections database. Through the USF collaboration, NJAHS has provided hands-on training for 59 USF Museum Studies graduate program students and an additional 13 NJAHS interns in collections management tasks such as digitization and condition reporting. These students are the project's primary workforce. USF also hosts the online collection and works with NJAHS on protocol for proper documentation. The collaboration culminated in Something from Nothing, art and handcrafted objects from America's concentration camps exhibition at the USF Thatcher Gallery in 2017, which was planned by USF Museum Studies professors and Gloria Simmons, director of the Thatcher Gallery, and NJAHS, and installed by former USF Museum Studies cohorts who are now working at the gallery. The National Japanese American Historical Society's digital archives would not have been possible without funding from the Japanese American Confinement Sites Grant Program administered through the National Park Service Department of the Interior. Now let me show you what we have in the digital archives. If you are conducting your general research on the camps or Japanese Americans in the U.S. Armed Forces, this is what you'll find. 87 WRA Camp Engineering Plans and Maps, 77 WRA Camp Architectural Drawings, 351 3D objects brought to, made in, or purchased in camp, and military objects from the Japanese Americans in the U.S. Armed Forces, 407 documents and publications, 199 photographs from private collections, 48 oral history video excerpts on our website, and 191 oral history interview summary, keyword, quote, and index files. I will now show you a couple database entries of each type so you can get a feel for what is in the digital archives. We will now navigate to the first item by going to the Finding Aid and clicking on the link to the USF Gleason Library Digital Collections website, and using the links on the left side to filter the database by sort type and confinement site. You want to select Engineering Plans and Maps from Tule Lake. This is the Tule Lake Master Plot Plan. If you zoom in on this map, you can see the general layout of the camp. You will notice that each building is numbered. Refer to the legend on the right side of the map, which lists each type of building that you could find at Tule Lake. Looking at the notes, you can see that this is actually a map of Tule Lake made in 1945 after it became the Tule Lake Segregation Center to imprison people the U.S. government deemed unloyal based on their response to the loyalty questionnaire. If you look down at the metadata underneath the photo, you'll see that this map and other Tule Lake scans were contributed by Jimmy Yamaichi of the Tule Lake Committee and the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. Starting back from the home page, we will go to Camps and select Jerome. We will be looking at architectural drawings. Here's an architectural drawing of the barracks constructed for the general population at Jerome. You can see the elevation drawings for the exterior of a typical barrack with measurements, as well as the general floor plan and layout. The second drawing shows the foundation and framing of a typical barrack. Rosalyn Tonai, NJAHS Executive Director, went to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and ordered high-resolution scans of these maps available for you to view. If you would like to physically locate these maps at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., the location, including the record number, is in the metadata below the image. Using the search function, I will now look for the next featured objects. This is a samurai carved out of ironwood, a form of extremely heavy, dense wood. Tsunejiro Tanaka created this carving while incarcerated at Poston. He and his friends were called Yama-Adashi, Scourgers of the Desert. They went on expeditions into the desert to bring ironwood back to the camp. Here are other ironwood carvings created by Tsunejiro and donated by Walter Tanaka, who served in the military intelligence service while his father was imprisoned at Poston. George Tamura's set of 10 colored pencil drawings were drawn on the back of a Presidio of San Francisco eviction poster cut into 10 sections. 15 years old at the time, Tamura and his family were imprisoned at Tulu Lake. After World War II, he went on to become an art director, PR, and advertising executive. In 1995, he published Reflections, his autobiography. In 2004, the drawings were featured on the PBS show History Detectives, where the show's host helped NJAHS staff person Kenji Liu connect the drawings to George Tamura. The Tamura drawings are currently on display at the MIS Historic Learning Center. The next items are a series of carved wooden bird and shell flower brooches. Incarcerees would carve these bird brooches based on Audubon Society cards in art classes. The shell flower brooches will be given away as gifts, as real flowers were hard to find in the desert. We also have collections of shells, materials, and wood carving sets. How did they find all of these shells in the desert? Topaz and Tulu Lake were located on ancient lake beds, and the shells could be found with minimal digging. Many of these bird carvings and shellflower brooches were featured in the traveling exhibition, The Art of Gammon, Arts and Crafts from the Japanese American Internment Camps, 1942 to 1946. This photograph shows a shipment of miso, soy sauce, and green tea sent to Raur by the International Red Cross. For the Issei, this is one of the few bright spots during their imprisonment. They recall that the arrival of these goods showed that they were not entirely forsaken. As the Block 40 manager, Shintaro Ito and his assistants were tasked with distributing these supplies to the households in this area. This miso distribution receipt shows the signatures of the block managers who received miso on February 23, 1944. These photographs of jazz and swing bands in camp were collected by George Yoshida. The collection includes interview notes, photographs, recordings, and address books that were the basis of his seminal book, Reminiscing in Swing Time, Japanese Americans in American Popular Music, 1925 to 1960, which was published by the Historical Society. We celebrated George Yoshida's contributions to the community at the NJAHS Annual Awards Dinner in 2013. Since we are on the subject of music in camp, these dance bits from Gila River were donated by May Nakano. And this saxophone was donated by Elaine Weston, was owned by Frank Tashima, bandleader of the Densoneers, aka the D11s in Jerome. The saxophone was on display at Something from Nothing, art and handcrafted objects from America's concentration camps at the USF Thatcher Gallery in 2017. There are two opportunities to make Amachi a National Historic Site, which shall preserve these sites of incarceration so future generations can learn about Japanese American confinement during World War II. The Amachi National Historic Site Act and the National Park Service Special Resource Study. We, the National Parks Conservation Association, the Amachi Preservation Society, and the Amachi Historical Society too, encourage all of you, regardless of which camp you or your family are historically linked to contact your members of Congress to urge them to co-sponsor the Amachi National Historic Site Act. You can take action from the National Parks Conservation Association website. The public comment period will end June 30, 2021. It We will now navigate to a document from Amachi using the homepage map. This tooltip shows previews of other items from Amachi in the database. Please note that some documents with many pages may take some time to load. This Amachi Co-op souvenir album contains the history of the Amachi Co-op, a temporary community enterprise that began from soda pop distribution in 1942 and quickly expanded to as full-blown of a department store as you could get in a concentration camp, with services such as a barber shop, tailor, newspaper and radio, and even a photography studio. The album contains photographs and descriptions of each department. As noted before, we have a sizable collection of items from Nisei soldiers. These are pamphlets and translation documents created by the U.S. Army Air Force's Pacific Area Psychological Warfare Branch. They were donated by Steve Shizuma Yamamoto and Carl Yoneda, two military intelligence service veterans. Steve was selected to be in the first class, a group that was trained in the MIS language school at the Presidio of San Francisco in the months prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. He served in Australia, New Guinea, Philippines, and post-war occupation of Japan and was awarded the Bronze Star and Oak Leaf Cluster. Carl Yoneda was the Japanese language specialist assigned to the Psychological Warfare Branch in the China-Burma India Theater. They dispersed these propaganda leaflets throughout the Pacific Islands in an effort to encourage Japanese enemy troops to surrender. This is a surrender leaflet. It instructs Japanese soldiers to bring these leaflets with them when they surrender to the U.S. Army and guarantees that no harm will come to them when they do so. These U.S. Army issue uniform pieces were owned by Chaplain Masao Yamada, a Japanese American minister from the Hanapepe Japanese Christian Church of Kauai, Hawaii, who volunteered for the 442nd Regimental Combat Team upon learning that Caucasian chaplains had been assigned to the 442. His Bible and cross are showcased at the MIS Historic Learning Center in the Mission Map Room. He became the first Japanese American to graduate from the U.S. Army Chaplain School at Harvard University and participated in the liberation of Bruyere, Bifontaine, and Belmont in Italy, as well as the rescue of the Lost Battalion. After the war, he was the pastor of the Church of the Holy Cross in Hilo and dedicated himself to helping soldiers return to civilian life.
Hello, I'm Ishan Liu, an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley, studying Asian American Studies and Ethnic Studies. I work as an intern for NJAHS, and I will be introducing the oral history collection. NJAHS holds 553 oral history interviews since it began conducting them in 1983. The interviews were primarily recorded on cassette tapes and then transcribed, printed, and archived. Many interviews were also recorded on a variety of analog recording media, such as VHS, U-matic, High 8, and beta tapes. Tape recordings have a shelf life, so it was imperative that we digitize these personal recordings before they degraded. NJAHS interns and staff digitized the cassette tapes, while AV expert Calvin Roberts took great care to digitize the old U-matic tapes of videographer Paul Hada's collections. Our NJAHS interns then transcribed the recordings or scanned and edited the physical transcripts and wrote summaries, indices with time codes, selected excerpts from each transcript, and wrote the keyword search terms. There are 180 oral history, interview, summary, keywords, excerpts, and index documents in the USF database. They can be found by browsing the database, from the Camp pages, or from the finding aid. Additionally, 48 video excerpts are available in the oral histories section of this web portal. As a student of Asian American Studies and an intern at NJAHS, I've been asked to comment on something I learned from the many oral histories I've listened to and transcribed. One of the interviews in this digital archive collection that impacted me the most was an interview with Ben Kuroki, who was the only Japanese American who was allowed to serve on the United States Air Force during World War II.
And I flew with all kinds of gunners, different nationalities and different religions. And that the cries of pain were always about the same. The color of the blood was always the same. And we had a job to do, and we did it with the finest kind of comradeship. It didn't seem to matter when you were in combat what you were or where you came from or anything like that. Said I went to war to fight against Hitler and Tojo to prove that didn't make any difference what your race or ancestry was to be an American citizen. I think basically that's what it was all about.
In total, he flew 58 missions, 33 more than the requisite 25. In the interview, he spoke about how when he returned from these missions, he still faced discrimination, but continued to persevere through this adversity. In particular, in this oral history excerpt, he reflected on his purpose for going on all of those missions, showing that being an American citizen isn't about one's race or ethnicity, but about one's actions. I felt that this quote truly gets to the heart of what being an American is, and how that can't be defined by one's background. This is an especially crucial message in the current moment of increased anti-Asian sentiment, which is a continuation of a long legacy of Asian Americans being stereotyped as forever foreigners and unassimilable aliens. Kuroki's heroism and his words inspire me to envision a future in which everybody is able to feel that they belong in this country and feel pride in who they are. By reading and listening to the stories found in the NJAHS archives, I was able to broaden my understanding of the Asian American experience, and I hope that it will allow others to do the same.
The NJAHS Digital Archives also has 10 original Japanese or Spanish language Japanese Peruvian oral history excerpts with English translations. These oral history interviews were uploaded to the online database courtesy of Project Director Grace Shimizu of the Japanese Peruvian Oral History Project. The excerpts and their English translations are in the online database. If you would like to hear the excerpts in their original language, you can go to the Crystal City Camp page. This is just an introduction of what you can find in the NJAHS Digital Archives by going to the website njahs.org/confinement sites. To begin your research, use the map on the homepage to select the camp and then the type of item you want to view. You can also go to the Finding Aid page to click on the link to USF Digital Collections and browse there. You can also click on object type and camp name using the menu on the left side. Additionally, from the Finding Aid page, you can view our oral history summaries by clicking on the categories and selecting a keyword. This only works with oral history summaries to start, but we plan to add keywords to all of the other entries in the database. For inquiries on photo requests, object loans for exhibitions, specific research, and access to the full oral history transcripts, please visit the permissions page For more information, and email njahs@njahs.org and we will help fulfill your request. Thank you so much to all the interns whose hard work you can see here today. Thank you to project consultant Paloma Año-Veros, former USF Digital Collections Librarian Jessica Zhang Liu, and current USF Digital Collections Librarian Gina Morell, whose expertise has guided the direction of the NJAHS Digital Archives, and to the USF Museum Studies Program, the Gleason Library, and Thatcher Gallery. Thank you to everyone who worked on the website, and thank you to Claudia Katayanagi, Calvin Roberts, and Grace Shimizu for working on the oral history content. Lastly, thank you to the Japanese American Confinement Sites Grant Program, which has made this work possible.
Thank you to Max and Rosalyn for those presentations. At this point, we're going to transition into our question and answer portion of the program. I'm going to just make a quick note to our audience. We're going to reserve the more general questions for this point in time, given the time limit of the program, and the more specific family research questions we're going to answer directly via email after the program. So if you don't hear your question, don't worry about it. We will get to you at some point. So I'm going to start with, I guess, some questions about general records in the related to the WRA camps. So Joyce Nakamura asked, where can birth records and birth certificates in the WRA camps be found?
I think the problem is, I think it's based on all family files. So you can only access them through the family. You can't get a general birth record. I think what you can do is determine perhaps the ages of people by looking at the final accounting roster, and then determining the, by camp, and then determining, who was a child or baby or born in camp, and then from there determining the family, and then approaching the family if you can, research that, and asking for them to pull the file, because the case files are, have hundreds of pages in there, and they're going to be copied for the family. It's requested by particularly the family, but if they're deceased, you can show a death record and obtain them, but it's case by case, not by, mass amounts. So I think people can, who know more about this, can probably offer some advice on the chat on that too.
All right, our next question comes from Gordon Hamachi. On the FAR, is there a key to abbreviations? For example, I presume POAC means Pomona Assembly Center, but if you're not from Southern California, you probably wouldn't guess this.
Yes, on page 12, what you do is you go to the final accountability roster and you start to scroll toward the front. And if you go on the very front, there's a cover of the page, it's microfiche, right? So I think on page 12, the last time I checked, there is a index or a legend, they say, and it tells you what all the abbreviations mean.
Great. So our next question also kind of related more to the camp time period before we transition into some other time periods for the questions. Julina Cow asked, could you tell me where I might find records on men coming from the camps who joined the military at the very end of the war? Did all join the 442 at this time, or because it was the end of the war, might some have joined a different unit? If military records are hard to find due to a fire at the St. Louis Records Branch, is there another site that might have this information?
You could try to, I think we gave you some locators on military lists, but we'll probably have to do another session on just on the military Army records because it's a little more convoluted. It depends where they served. I mean, MIS ones are different from the 442 ones. It could be that it could be anything. They could have served actually anywhere. And sometimes they were recruited and they served in the General Army. They weren't necessarily in the segregated unit. So again, it's kind of like the case files. You have to do it on a case-by-case basis, or you have to take a look at Army units and take a look at their rosters. I think that's probably the best way, but we'll probably have another session on that just to dive deeper on that. That's a good question.
Great. So our next question is going to transition into just more general types of records and not specifically WRA. Joy Gold asked, what is the earliest date available for census records?
Let's see. I was looking some as early as 1820 or 1830 in general. And because we were looking at, in my studies, we were looking at slave, inhabitants in the South. So I think it's about 1820, 1830.
Okay, so we're actually hitting 12 o'clock. So our next three questions actually are all the same theme. So we're gonna go ahead and combine these three and kind of have these be the closing. And everyone else, again, if we didn't get to your question, that's because it's a little more specific and we want to reply to you on an individual basis. So just hang tight for an email later on after the program. So Leona, Yoshi, and Naomi are all asking for more information on researching your ancestors in Japan and searching for ancestral information from Japan. We shared information about homes, but is there a way to search for ancestors? And is that maybe a future workshop?
Yes, we're going to probably do a general workshop or presentation virtual June 26th from our colleague. I think someone was asking in the chat, what's his name? Hiroshi Yanagisawa. He started helping Sansei and Nisei to sort of find their roots. He's located in the, Aichi, Nagoya area, but he's helped people, throughout Japan. But again, it's case by case. So you have to have some clue of who you think your relative is. And then he goes from those clues to search. So the best thing to do is to start from yourself. If you're looking for long lost relatives, start from yourself. Obviously, that's your parents, and then go backwards in time. So most likely you have to look at immigration records. So on the immigration records, like I said, the second page will list their place of origin. And that's how we were able to more trace. I mean, we kind of knew the area, but we didn't know specifically the actual home. But that's how we were able to trace the actual home of our ancestor.
All right, so that brings our program to a close just because we were short on time. Of course, we will follow up via email for the rest of those questions. So thank you very much to Rosalyn and Max for their presentations today. We really appreciate it, and we hope everybody learned a lot from this presentation today. And as mentioned, we are going to have a future presentation on genealogy again in June with researcher Hiroshi Yanagisawa from Japan. So in closing, I want to give a few acknowledgements and thank a few funders. So thank you, of course, to the San Francisco Grants for the Arts, the Henry and Tomoya Takahashi Foundation, San Francisco Japantown Foundation for your support for our programs this year, of course, and each year. All right, so yeah, that was our closing. Thanks again, and we will see you next month.